So in 2024, the college football playoff will be extending to 12 teams. That's right, 12 teams. So that means more teams have the opportunity to win a national championship. But does that hurt or help college football as we know it today? Let's talk about it. Stay tuned for this week's episode of the Follow the Movement podcast. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Follow the Movement podcast. This is your host, Selldretti. Before we get into this week's episode, if you enjoy this podcast and you want to continue this journey with me, please hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, leave a review on my podcast, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you can find my podcast. I will have it on my website and I will be sharing it on all my social media accounts. Those links can be found in the description of this episode. Without further ado, let's get into it. So this week, we're going to be talking about the college football playoff and specifically the expansion of the college football playoff from 4 teams to 12 teams. So recently, they just came up with an agreement that starting in the 2024 season, they will expand the college football playoff to 12 teams. So what does that mean for college football in the future? So the obvious reason would be is more teams will have the opportunity to play for a national championship. And the big question is, will this help or hurt college football? And in my opinion, it will definitely help, because if you look at the history of the most recent BCS era leading up to the college football playoff era today, it seems that it's been one-sided. A lot of the teams that has been winning the national championship over the last 10 to 15 years has been an SEC team. You know, you got Alabama, they won back-to-back in the BCS era, and they won a few in the college football playoff era. You know, they've been back-to-back over the last decade. And then you have Florida. Florida's been up in there when Tim Tebow was there. And then you got Auburn. They've been in the college football national championship a few times. And now recently it's been Alabama and Georgia, back and forth. You know, they faced each other twice, I believe. And Georgia just won a second national championship back to back. So I think that now that you expand the college football playoff to 12 teams, now you open the door for more teams, not just in the SEC, but in other conferences like the Big 12, the Big 10s, you know, the Pac-12. You know, you open the door up for more teams to be able to compete on that high level. Because, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, in the Big 12, Big 10, you got Michigan, you got Ohio State, you got Oklahoma State, USC. You know, you got teams like that are dominant in their conferences every year, to the point where those are the only teams that get to represent their conference on the biggest stage. And when it comes to the SEC, you know, the SEC has been so dominant that more teams from the SEC are in the playoffs every year. For the most part, it's been the same teams. You know, it's been Alabama, of course. Most recently, it's been Georgia. You know, Georgia has been in the mix of the playoff for the last 5 years, and Alabama's been in it for the last decade. You got Auburn in there, you got Florida. When you think about it, when you expand the college football playoff to 12 teams, not only are you expanding it for more teams to have an opportunity to get to the national championship, but you're also testing the SEC. You're challenging the SEC. You're basically saying, okay, these teams have been dominant for the last 10 to 15 years. Okay, let's open it up to 12 teams and really see who is the best. You know, I feel like we get a bigger sample size of experimentation, pretty much. Like, we get to see who is actually the best team, because some teams might surprise you, like Kansas State, for example. You know, you got Kansas State, you know, you got TCU, which came out of the blue this year. You know, they got blown out by Georgia, but they had an awesome season. You know, they beat 5 top 25 teams. You know, that was a surprising move right there. Some of these teams just don't have the schedule. They don't play the teams. But is that a knock on them? I mean, is that really gauging how good they are if they don't have the opportunity to play the best teams in the nation? Some people will say yes, some people will say no. But now that you opening up the college football playoff to 12 teams, now you have teams have the opportunity to bounce back from losses, because when you talk about, how it is now with four teams, if you lose a game or if you lose 2 games, pretty much if you lose 2 games, you're not going to the playoffs. Like you really not going to the playoffs. Now, say that the college football playoff was right now, the expansion of 12 teams was right now, and Alabama lost 2 games like they did this year, Alabama would still be in it. I believe, based on the performances of the teams in the college football playoff this year, I believe that Alabama would be back in it facing Georgia. Now, will the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams allow more teams to come in and dominate the college football playoff like the SEC? I don't think so. I really think that it's going to be pretty leveled off. I think it's going to be an equal number of SEC teams, Pac-12, Big 10, Big 12. We're going to see Ohio State, Michigan. And over time, we're going to start seeing more teams getting to compete, like the top 10 or top 12 pretty much. In the college football playoff of last year, you got Utah upsetting USC, their conference championship game. And you got TCU, who surprised us, Kansas State, who beat TCU in their conference championship game, and they're ranked in the top 12. So, that's kind of interesting when you think about it. And, personally, I'm a Georgia fan, but I really want to see how good my team is and how good all the other teams really are, because I don't judge a team based off one loss. I like to get a big sample size of a team and how they performed over the course of a year or two, because some losses are flukes. Some losses are flukes. You could say that Alabama was actually better than Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU if they went head to head. We're not even talking about the 2 losses they took. The 2 losses that they had were from top 10 teams, and they were also close losses. So one of them was an overtime loss and the other one was back and forth, and they were away games. You can make that argument too. But now that it's 12 teams, it makes more room for, less arguments. Whoever's in the top 12, that's who's going to be in it. It's going to be less room for error. Well, not less, but it's going to be more room for error, actually, because, you can lose a game and still get in, depending on, I believe it's still going to be dependent on who you lose to. But if you lose a game against a top 10, top 25 team and you win out the rest of the season, then you still have the opportunity. Or if you lose 2, maybe 3 games, you never know. If you lose 3 games, depending on how bad the loss was and the significance of the loss, a team might be able to get in the top 12 and still get in the playoff and still perform well. I'm not trying to compare the NFL with the college football playoff, but when you think about, these teams, for example, the New York Giants, when they won the Super Bowl against the undefeated Patriots that year, nobody expected the New York Giants to beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl, let alone get to the Super Bowl. Nobody expected that, but they got to the playoffs, they got to the wild card, and they won the rest of their game. Same with the college football playoff. If a team can lose 3 games and still get into the playoff and then shock everybody by beating every team in the playoffs and winning the national championship, I think that's great. That's excellent. That's expanding the way we think about college football and erasing all these biases. The SEC is just so dominant that no other team can win a national championship, which is false. Which is false. Now, I will give you this. The SEC do recruit at a high level. Most of their schools in the SEC are getting 5-star, 4-star athletes, and their recruiting classes in the top 5 every year, like Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M, teams like that. But I really think that when you expand the college football playoff to 12 teams, it opens up the door for more conferences to really showcase their talent and really showcase how good they are at a high level, on the biggest stage against the biggest level of talent. And I really think this is going to help college football because it's going to extend the season, right? It's going to extend the season. It's going to be more teams playing for a national championship. And also, when you talk about the SEC and their dominance over the last decade, this can be a pivotal point. That dominance. Is the SEC really dominant? Are they really the best conference? That's really going to be tested because there are going to be more teams from other conferences playing in that playoff. And there's going to be two teams, different styles, different playing styles and different the way they play football. They're not used to playing teams like that. Like a team in the SEC is not used to playing a team like Oklahoma, because Oklahoma is a passing team, or USC is a passing team. Or a team like Georgia is a running team. They're known for running the ball. So a team like that going against a team like USC in the college football playoff, I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome. And I can't wait. I really can't wait. I'm all about the dogs. I'm all about Georgia. I hope they three-peat. If Georgia three-peats, they have I think they will officially take Alabama's spot as the most dominant team in college football. I believe that. My last episode, I was talking about how Alabama is still right there as the most dominant team given their history. But I said right now, Georgia is the team to beat because they did go back to back. But if they three-peat, then Georgia is the team. Georgia is the team. Alabama is a thing in the past. Not that far in the past. They still up there in the top 5, top 3. They still gonna be up there. But when you talk about the most dominant team right now, I think it's gonna be Georgia if they three-peat. Even if they don't three-peat, I think Georgia is still the team to beat right now. And Alabama is still gonna be up there. I had made a question on Facebook about what if Alabama and Georgia continue to dominate the college football playoff, or the SEC continues to dominate the playoffs every year? Will they expand it to 16 teams, to 20 teams maybe? I don't know. But I feel like they're extending the college football playoff because over the years, I guess people get tired of seeing the same teams winning the national championship, like Georgia and Alabama every single year, Clemson, the same team, Florida State, the same teams winning the national championship, or the same matchups every single year. I think people get tired of that. So I think they're expanding it so we can get something fresh, something new, see different teams and from different backgrounds and different, walks of, different walks of life. Teams just come from different parts of the United States and play each other, because, that's very interesting. Georgia against USC, Alabama versus Kansas State. I mean, that's interesting. That's very interesting. So I really think the 12 team playoff is going to be, very, very good for the college football world. And I'm interested in seeing who's going to go to the college football playoff. And when they expand to 12 teams, who's going to be the teams, who's going to be the matchups, and who's going to come out on top as that team who won the national championship when it, like the first team to ever win the national championship in the 12 team playoff. I'm interested in seeing that. So that concludes my episode. I really appreciate everybody who's been listening, who's been downloading, who's been subscribing to my channel and my podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I really appreciate it. I will catch y'all in the next episode. Be all you can be. Stay true to who you are. And remember to follow the movement. Peace.